Welcome back, everyone, to the Fly Culture Podcast with me, Pete Tigers. How are you doing? Are you catching some fish? Have you got some fishable water? I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you. I hope you do. Before I start the podcast, I wanted to shout out a book by my friend Theo Pike called River Trout Streamer Fishing. It's a real beauty, and I've been very, very fortunate to be involved with it. I've contributed to it. But if you're looking to get into streamer fishing, improve your streamer fishing, or you're streamer curious, then this is going to be the book for you. So I think it's got a page on Instagram, River Trout Streamer Fishing. Go take a look at that. It's a really good book. He's a wonderful, wonderful writer, and he's captured so much information that I think you're going to get a lot from it. So that's something to look forward to. On to my guest for today. Jack Westbury is a young angler who fishes around the Derbyshire neck of the woods. And we cover a lot of ground. We look at fishing during winter and his approach to it. And we end up covering lots of different subjects. And there's a few questions that I throw to him that he answers beautifully, that are packaged with a lot of information that I think you're going to get something from. And the idea is that we're coming into winter, that those cold mornings come, we're on the river, what do we do? So there's lots here that I hope you're going to really enjoy listening to. It's great to catch up with you, Jack. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Very well.
Good. It's great to have you along. The obvious question to start with is, have you been fishing?
I have. I've been out a few times recently, although I think the recent rains might put a stop to that for a few weeks, but we'll see. Try and get out as much as we can.
And this time of year as well is a special one. That's sort of in between those cold winter days and the back end of where the trout season's finishing. Can be a great time to be out in the water, can't it?
Yeah, at the minute we're in between that time where it's not quite cold enough that the Grayling have started shoaling up and switched over to what I'd say sort of Grayling flies, and the trout are still on the feed a little bit, which is unfortunate. But at the end of the day, we can't help it. It's just one of those things. It's one of them times. There's still plenty of flies about, and the fish are still feeding, so we're still out and fishing.
And on the previous podcast with Paul, that we were searching high and low for some rising grayling, and we figured out why it probably didn't play out that way. But we'll come on to where you're based in a moment. But where you fish, do you tend to encounter rising grayling at this time of year?
Not really. I would say when we have that sort of switch from the flood starting to come in a bit, it does seem to put them down, especially on the Y where we fish it. You don't get many risers. The Derwent is a little bit different. You do get in the tail end of the pools, it's usually a little bit shallower. So if there is a hatch, stoneflies or olives or something like that, you can get a few grayling, usually on spiders or something like that. It's usually a better method this time of year, I'd say.
And it's interesting. I was down fishing the Froome, and I believe the strain of grayling is similar to what you have up there as well. And John was saying it's unusual for him to see those rise too. And I just wonder if that is just, of that particular strain of fish, if it's something to do, those ones don't like to rise in quite the same way.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. But I've fished the Y for a few years now in the grayling time, and I can't say I've ever seen in the way of consistently rising grayling where I've thought I need to go on the dry fly to get these fish. It's always sort of been down on the depths, sort of with a nymphs or something like that, trying to get them. But I say it's a little bit different on the Derwent. If you do get a bit of clarity, and like you say, the hatch, it's you can get them there.
And you've alluded to a couple of rivers, the Wye, the Derwent. So myself, and I'm sure many people listening will know exactly where you mean. But can you tell us where you're based and what that means from a fishing perspective for you?
So I'm based in Derbyshire, Chesterfield area. So for me, the local waters is like the Peacock, so the Wye and the Derwent there. Also, I remember another club, Derbyshire County Angling, and we've also got the good stretches of the Dove as well. So it's all around the sort of Derbyshire area. Them locations seem to be my usual haunts where I'm found along the banks, and I do also do a bit of still water fishing as well. So time of year I do get out on the still waters as well.
And you mentioned those rivers, and my observations, and I know we were talking off mic as well, that the quality of members of that club is something quite extraordinary. You know, I think of people like yourself and Andy and Chris and lots of Jeff, lots of other people as well who are members of the club. Do you find that as well? And do you find that from a perspective of bouncing ideas off people, Damien, of course, as well? Do you find that from bouncing ideas off people really useful too?
Yeah, it's one of the clubs where you go and the rivers, I won't say pressured, it's more just the quality of the anglers make it sort of a unique fishing experience to you. You know, you've got to sort of fish to the best of your abilities to be able to catch the fish, because they are quite wary of you being there, and the usual sort of what I call the angling spots where you can see the sort of trodden banks and the areas that get fished a lot. You know, you will notice that a lot of the fish there, they definitely know you're there. So you've got to sort of, like I say, it does help having different ideas of people. I mean, I fish a lot with my mate Steve Berkhamshaw. That's where we've sort of started. Me and Steve from years ago, getting ideas off each other and getting the experience to, move on with the current times and keep wanting each other to do better and better. And that's the only thing I think that's increases maybe your catch rate a little bit and the fish that you want to catch. It definitely helps. Long chats at night, usually on the phone for an hour or two on where we went wrong and what we could have done better and stuff like that. It does really help.
You said something really interesting to me then as well about the well-trodden paths. And does that mean anglers like yourselves are trying to avoid those well-trodden paths and slide into a spot that you think or hope perhaps there might be a fish sitting there that hasn't seen as many flies as perhaps some others?
Yeah, absolutely. There's many occasions where I come out with more trees and bits of leaves on me and down my chest pack and pulling them out my waders. But when it pays off and you get into that fish that that you almost think that it hasn't seen a fly for that long, that it's a little bit more easier to catch, or at least it'll take a little bit easier anyway. Whether you catch it or not, it's another thing. But yeah, it's I find it helps, especially sliding down and getting on your hands and knees, crawling through the brushes and stuff like that. And even if you can get, I'm referring a lot to the wide, to be honest, because of the nature. If you can't wade it definitely helps getting in places that you can see the usual haunts where everybody fishes, but even going around the other side of banks and pushing through all this undergrowth. But for me, it does pay off. Like, there's some big fish lurking around about these areas where you can't get your fly usually.
Yeah, that's an interesting point as well. And I've just written something that will probably be out soon about the bow and arrow and where you can use it. Those sort of adapt and mend casts. And as somebody who comes from an instructor's background, but I kind of like trying to figure out a way to get a fly to its destination. It takes a little bit of ingenuity at times, doesn't it?
It does. It's one of those things. Me and my mate Steve, he says it a lot. It's more about just getting the fly in front of the fish. No matter how you do it, if the fly's in front, you've always got a chance, and it does. It seems to be a good payoff sometimes.
And one of the other interesting things about, I know you mentioned the Derwent as well, and we did a podcast up there, and I was there with Jeff and Adam, and the fish rising there, and I learned so much from that river by watching the behaviour of fish, the effect of micro drag as well. And there was a fish we were all trying for quite some time, kept rising quite happily, and it took just a very subtle change in where we were positioned to get that right drift out of it. Do you find that with the trout, certainly, when they're rising, you have to you get a chance to see what they're up to, which is kind of nice as well, and they seem to continue rising. And of course, if you stuff a cast, they're going to go away, but they'll give you a little bit of a look. And does that allow you to learn some stuff that you walk away with too?
Absolutely. A lot of time this season, to be honest, on the Derwent, the fish have been feeding on aphids. We've looking about, trying to find the right trees where these aphids are sort of dropping in from. And often behind that, you'll find sort of fish all the way along the river on the flow line, sort of picking off these aphids. And the micro drag, trying to get a size 20 little green fly to drift down without it having any micro drag when you can get it and it pays off, is just absolutely fantastic. When it's been sipping away there, and you have to wait for your rings to die down once you get in the water. But once they come back on the feed, then, and you're just waiting for them to start sipping away. I mean, a lot of the time this season I use quite long leaders anyway, to be honest, usually about 22, 24 foot, something like that. But when you can I tend to do a lot of downstream fishing just to try and present the fly first, get all the leader and all the fly line behind the fly, getting that fly to go down first. So obviously the first thing it sees is the fly rather than the tippet or the leader or anything like that. That's been one of the big things for me. And then obviously tippet size as well, keep going down, even 0.10, even 0.8 sometimes when it's really tricky. But it's a bit ropey when you start getting to then you're hooking a big fish, anything over a pound, and you're starting to worry a little bit.
And those longer leaders, because I'm sure there'll be people listening, did you find they took some getting used to from a casting perspective, or did you sort of, were you starting at 12 foot and adding to it, or going straight from 12 to 20, or what was that process for you with discovering 20 foot or 22 foot long leaders?
So it started my usual, coming from where I started fishing. It usually come from like a tapered leader, and then just add some tippet on the end of that, which is fine and it does the job. But I found that you just couldn't you were making more mends, and the more you mend, the more you drag the fly, the more you're putting fish off, especially on the Derwent. Like I say, it's getting quite a bit of pressure, a lot of anglers sort of thing. So, we went back and, like I say, learned long chats again at night, thinking what we can do, try and alter something that we're doing, make it a bit better for themselves. Eventually, me and Steve come up with, we'll try some of these long leaders. I think it was like the RK. He had a website, put some leader descriptions on there. And so we eventually come round to using like a Maxima chameleon, tapering it down, using different lengths, come up with this leader. And then it was, like you say, it took a few sessions out on the river, getting used to these long leads, different casting, a lot more slower in your back cast. But once you get it absolutely transformed my fishing. From there, it's something that I've always used ever since. Just adding your bit of tippet on the end, usually a level bit of 6, 7x, something like that. And because everybody thinks you want a nice sort of straight and narrow as you can get your loops, and cast it out, keep it nice and tight, and it looks lovely. But for fishing purposes, for me, I'd rather have slack in it. So get a nice drift a foot above a fish, let it drift down to it, and let that slack open out as it gets down to that fish. And I found a lot more success doing it like that myself.
And do you find that you'll sit and tie a bunch of leaders, or do you have some already on tap and ready?
Yeah, so I get my measuring, my tape out, and I measure all them, and I usually have a box upstairs where I keep all my leaders, and when I always put one in my chest pack before I go, make sure I've got a one to take with me. But yeah, I always make all my leaders, make them to a standard 17, 19 foot, something like that, and then I can always swap and change, and I can alter it on the bank if I need to. But for me, I've never really found it. It's only really changed when you can see a load of kinks and, they start getting a little bit worn in sort of thing, and then I'll just swap it out and put a new one on for me.
And how do you attach it to the fly line?
So usually, I think this season I've been using a Scientific Anglers Mastery double taper 2-weight, and it's already got a pre-made loop on the end. So I just use the usual blood knot to the end of that, because I find it slides through my rings. If I do a loop to loop, I find you get that knot and you get the clunk from the back end of that knot, and I don't like it. I'd rather have something that sort of slips through my rings a little bit easier. So yeah, I just use a usual blood knot to the end of that connection.
That's a nice tip. I might try that myself. And do you find that does anything to the loop on the fly line, or it's all sits down there really nicely?
Yeah, I've taken it off 1 or 2 times. I always have a bit of a check round, but I can't say it occasionally, at the end of the season, I might cut that loop off and then I'll put my own sort of micro loop in the end, strip the end off and put a new whipping on. And as long as obviously all the fly line's fine, which I have just checked, to be honest with you, and it is. So yeah, I just put another connection to that and then time a leader to that, and it's all good. I've never had an issue with it myself.
Nice. I like that. Well, I'm going to try that then. So thank you for that. You've been busy as well. I've seen your socials last few days, some grayling workshops.
Yeah, just come back and just did a grayling workshop with Mallon and Green. Very good day. I think it went very well. Well, 2 days actually. It was a Saturday and Sunday. Luckily, we managed to get Ben Bangham over as well and got him down Saturday. Lucky enough to have a day's fishing with him Friday as well, which are very interesting. Great to learn some sort of new techniques and something to take away, to try on other rivers and such like that. But yeah, the workshop went very well. Everybody were very pleased with how it went, and I think we got some really good feedback. So yeah, really chuffed.
And those sorts of things, do you really enjoy doing them? Do you look forward to them and like sharing your knowledge?
Yeah, it's something I wouldn't say I particularly look forward to it, because I always get a little bit nervous doing any events sort of thing. I'm one of them that always thinks they're the worst situation for some reason, even though when I get there I'm fine and everything usually goes better than I thought. So, but apart from that, I do look forward to it. It's nice to see a lot of anglers out on the bank and asking questions and wanting to learn. It's good to see, from a fishing perspective.
And can you share with people what was the biggest takeaway from that weekend? What was the tip that you gave that you think people got the most from?
I would say probably, because we were focusing a lot on yaw and infin, I would say it's trying to beat down the thing of connection to your fly is the biggest thing. If you haven't got connection to your fly, you're not connected and you're not going to know when a fish takes your fly. And I know we've been saying, grayling especially, with how quick and they can reject a fly, you need to be able to have that bit of connection to it to register a take. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest things that most people took away.
Great. Well, we're going to move on to some winter grayling tips shortly, but I'd like to look into your timeline a little bit and wondered where you first picked up a fly rod.
So I first picked up a fly rod when I was, or should I say let loose with a fly rod, when I was about 11 years old. It come from my granddad. He was and still is an avid stillwater angler. Still try and get out with him as much as I can, maybe a couple, 3 times a month or something like that. And we usually go and have a session. And that's where it come from. He got me into it, sort of thing. I suppose it's just something I've absolutely loved ever since he put a fly rod in my hand. We went down to Oxton Reservoir. That's where I first learned to fish. And he used to cast out for me. I used to retrieve the fly and see what it felt like to hook a fish, which has never gone away ever since. Like, it's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it's brilliant, really.
And he was obviously one of your mentors. Have you had other mentors that have helped you along the way, that have helped shape how you look at fly fishing? You mentioned Steve, so I guess he's going to feature a little bit.
Yeah, Steve's definitely up there. Steve, again, met him out on the bank, on the banks of river, I think it was Stillwater actually, on Tiln Lake. Ever since he was stood next to me, we were catching a few fish, and I was struggling a little bit, as I can remember. And he says, with the old thing of giving you a fly to try, and you put it on and you catch a fish, and you're like, oh, yeah. And then you just got talking, and from there, exchanged numbers, and then that's been it ever since. So me and Steve have probably 2015. So yeah, probably above 10 years now we've been friends, and nearly every session when we've been out, have a chat over at night and see how it's gone, what we've caught, what we could have done better, and what flies have been working, where the fish was sitting, a bit of everything really. But it's if you can ever find anybody, a good friend like that, is something real special.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's great news to hear. move on a little bit, because what I'd like to do is take this in a slightly different direction. I'd like to get your take on winter fishing. So perhaps let's imagine it's a cold, clear, crisp morning and you're on the river. First up, what are you thinking from a setup point of view? So I'd like to know, and I'm sure listeners too, rod length, because I know I'm detecting some changes over the last 2-3 years in how people are looking at their Euro-nymphing rods. And from a leader perspective, are you rolling your own leaders, your own Euro leaders? What is your sort of setup from to start with?
So it can be different on the venue, because I mean, if I'm basing it off of sort of the dome where we can wade and get in and fish, I'm quite short. I've got quite short arms, as I've been told before, so I like a bit of a longer rod. So usually my Euro setup, we've just got the new Diamondback Generation 4s in, so I've been giving one of them a try for the last few months, and I don't know if there's anything in fishing that really changes the game in anything, but it was just, for me, the lightness and the sensitivity of the rod. It definitely is something that I look for, and it matched perfect sort of thing with what I wanted to do, and what, light beads, long. I can fish it short, I can fish it long. So that's the rod that I would this winter, if I get any conditions like that I'd stick with, and then just a close cage reel. So obviously no line around the back or anything like that. So I think I've got a Lamson Guru. I think it's the S. I think they call that the close cage one, and then the rod length, I think it's a 10'7" for a one weight, because we're not casting any line, obviously, something that's nice and light. And then the leader on there would be Sempi. 0.16 is my preferred sort of diameter. Maybe 18 if it was somewhere a bit different, a bit of heavier water, chucking a bit heavier flies. But 16 for me, I find, for where we fish, where the bottom is, you can't really bounce too many flies off the bottom. You've got to be up in the layers, just above the riverbed a little bit, otherwise you're going to end up snagging. So that little bit of sensitivity in the Sempi helps, 0.16, and then from there down to a little micro loop, and then just plenty of wax above that in different colours, pink and yellow, and then a bit of black in between is my favourite for my eyes. Everybody's different, of course. And then off that, some 0.10 tippet. I know everybody goes on either fluorocarbon or nylon, but for me, when you're getting down to them sort of diameters, I don't really know how much difference it makes, because you're using tungsten beads as the weight and how to cast them. So, I mean, at the minute we're using Stroft ABR, just a little bit of abrasion resistant. If you do come across any sort of boulders, stones, anything like that, they might obviously fish if they rub you off, but obviously Grayling aren't too bad for that. And then obviously all dependent on conditions, on whether it's usually 1, 2, or 3 fly cast. But yeah, that's my setup for Euro nymphing, and then usually I'm taking a second rod with an indicator or a bung or something like that as well, just in case I need to cast a little bit further, drift it a bit different, just a different presentation really. And at the minute I'm just trying out a Hardy Marksman 10'5", a little bit on the heavier side really for Grayling, but when you're chucking some big beads about, obviously it's going to help a little bit of turning them over, especially at range, and especially on the Y as well, where we can't wade. So something like that would just help us a bit. And then obviously with the same fly line 5 weight, I think it's a Rio trout, tactical trout, I think. And then I use, that's all dependent on conditions with the leaders I use, because I prefer to use wool, to be honest. If I can fish in any if it's a nice, sort of clear river, I'll use wool, just a little bit more natural and sensitive, I think, rather than sort of a foam indicator. But in big conditions, when it is a little bit dicey and the colour isn't great, I will use sort of a big bung, or Andy Buckley did one of the best ones with the adjustable droppers, the sliding bung. I do use that as well when I'm using bit bigger flies, and I got to chuck a 3.5 mil bead or a 4 mil or something like that. So.
Nice. Loads of great advice and tips there. One I'm sure people will want me to ask you. You talked about 2 or 3 nymphs on your setup. I would guess most people probably fish 2 nymphs. How far apart do you put them?
This was, to be fair, we had quite a lot of questions about this on the Grayling day we've just done at Mallon, and all again dependent on conditions. But from a starting point of view, I'm looking for about 60 to 70 centimetres from the indicator to my first dropper. If we're doing a 2-fly cast, of course. And then off of that, because I always do I forgot the type of knot it is now for the dropper. I'll come back to that, but use 2 lengths of nylon anyway from that. So if I get a break on the point fly, obviously I've got the dropper and it'll come off. But yeah, and then from the dropper to the point, usually I do try and fish a little bit towards comp rules, because I do like the way that everything's standardised, in a sense that, your length of your rod, your length of your leader, the length of your flies, because obviously in the comp rules it's 50 centimetres from your dropper to your point. So I usually go a little bit longer than that, usually 55 to 60 centimetres from my point fly to my dropper if we're using 2 flies. And obviously heaviest on the point for me, and a light dropper above it, or dependent on flow, usually a couple of 2 mils, 3 mils on the droppers, or 3 mil on the point as well have been a good casters lately.
It's been interesting, that trend towards lighter flies, and you said something earlier about not getting snagged on the bottom. So are you working on the basis that fish are having half an eye on food passing by, so it doesn't always have to be hard on the bottom for them to move just a little bit to eat it? And do you find that with more sizable fish as well, that they don't mind travelling a little bit to eat something that looks good?
It's a tough question to answer, that one, but I would say, for especially sort of if you're talking wintertime fishing, it's a little bit different, because Grayling tend to be, obviously on a cold day, tend to be a little bit more on the bottom, wanting to feed a little bit deeper. That might change throughout the day. If you do get warmer spells in the day, I do feel that they'll come up. And for me, I always think that fish would rather take a fly above themselves than go down for a fly. So, and you can get a better drift by drifting it above them, but it all depends on the flow and whereabouts they're sat in the flow as well, and whether they're on the slacks, on the edges, or something like that. So it's all about working it out on the day, really. I mean, there was a session last year I can remember quite well, and on the Derwent, where we were actually fishing overweighted flies, so quite a big jig back on the point, and then a couple of the lighter flies above it, and they actually wanted the cast slowing down, so you were actually having to sort of bomb it down on the deck and fish it slower than the current, and that's how you're catching a lot of the fish. That was on a really cold day with quite a heavy frost. I don't think it actually got above minus that day, but I'm always a bit conscious of that when I'm fishing. I don't really want to. I just want to fish to the best of my ability, or and trying these different things during the day. That's the biggest thing for me, is trying a bit of everything. Try a bit of light stuff. Even 2.5 mil beads in really, really sort of cold conditions sometimes have paid off, and then obviously working down from there. But for me, it's a lot of grayling fishing is what I've found anyway. I do prefer the smaller flies. Usually a 20 is a starting fly for me, and I've got a few above that and a few below that, sort of size wise, so I can always swap between them both. I mean, me and Steve worked it between us a little bit and found, when these sort of the jig force shorts, or the fastener 444s, the hooks with the eye the opposite way, and they're a lot more smaller for the size, so you can get a bigger bead on, and that for us really changed the game a little bit, that we could use these smaller flies, but that you could get like a 3.5 mil bead on a size 20. And it was still catching, probably more fish than a size 16 with a 3mm bead. That was one of the biggest things for us.
That's a really interesting point. Why do you think that is? Do you think, I'm thinking about a size 20 and a 3.5mm bead on it, and particularly if it were orange, let's say, for example, or red perhaps, that it's got that fish egg look to it more so than anything else. Do you think there's a little element of that, or what is your take on it?
I definitely think if you're going down, orange beads and stuff, I actually have tied patterns as well with literally just orange beads on the hook and a little bit of orange thread behind it just to keep it on and super glue it on. If they are feeding on the sort of egg flies or, the trout eggs or something like that. But I think the biggest thing is when you do actual kick samples and you're looking and about, all the nymphs and everything that's swimming about, just the actual size of them. If you put like a size 18 or a 16 jig hook in the water next to them, for me it just looks way too big. But there's always an element of a fish, you're attracting fish as well, I suppose. For me, it's nothing that can be ruled out. You've still got to have them bigger patterns on your side, especially more coloured water maybe, or deeper in the winter when you're wanting to attract them rather than just naturally feed. So it's same thing with fishing. There's no one right answer, and you're never going to know. All these years of fishing and everything like that, you're never actually going to know. It's just sort of what works for you and what you got confidence in. And for me, it's smaller hooks and bigger beads or something. That usually is one of my key in catching a few fish on where we fish. Like,
great answer, really good answer. Loads of other stuff that you said that's really interesting, and I would love your advice on slowing the flies down. So what are you doing to slow the flies down and hold them in spots? So what tip can you give for people listening that you think might be useful? Because, we're used to really tracking the flies, aren't we, most of the time? So what are you doing? Are you holding them back? How are you holding the flies back to slow them?
the biggest thing for me for slowing the flies down is having a heavier fly either on your point or and sort of when you're casting it out is you want enough slack to let it go down to sink to the bottom, and when you've got that, then you've got to tighten your cast into it, you're tracking your line, and the only way of doing it's a tough question really without actually fishing and having the water in front of you. It's hard to explain really. I'm sure there's a lot more people out there that could explain it better than me, but it is tough. You've got to be thinking underneath the water a little bit about your flies and where they're fishing. So the more angle you have to your rod tip down towards the water, the more that your droppers are going to fish closer to the bottom. So by lowering your cast, your other beads are going to catch on the bottom as well. So usually the rod angles and whereabouts your rod tip is in relation to the water is a big thing for me. And also downstream of you, if you've got that heavier fly in the point, if you're holding it downstream of you, you can almost track it down a little bit and lower your rod tip down. And as you're lowering it, your beads are going to want to sink a bit more as well. So you can slow them down like that. It's almost like causing a bit of a loop in your leader system. But as long as you've got a decent enough connection, or you can actually see your leader, your indicator on the end of your line, you've always got a point of contact to that's your first instinct that your fish has actually taken a fly. So you've just got to keep an eye on that. And if you're overweighting it anyway to fish slower, you will have good contact to that because you should feel it in your rod tip and through your leader and everything. You've got a light enough rod, you'll be able to feel it bumping the bottom a little bit, and you'll be able to slow them down through that. But it's tough to explain without the river in front of you.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. For listeners, you can't see that Jack's sort of pantomiming playing his flies and his rod through the water there. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense to you. Are you somebody who likes to manipulate and jig flies a little bit as well? Will you go like down there, dead drift them, and then you might go down again if you think something's there and manipulate the flies a little bit?
Well, this was actually a good question because it sort of touched on the day that we had with Ben Bangham last Friday when me and Steve and Ben went out and sort of sat on the bank and watched him for a bit work this pull, and it was totally. I've always been one for I prefer a dead drift because a lot of the fish, how I work off is trying to get the flies naturally coming through that current as possible, fishing nice and light. If you can have a nice connection to them light flies, you usually get pretty good takes because they've sort of got to come up and go down at the bottom, so you'll see the tape. And with doing that, with fishing lighter flies, you struggle to manipulate them as much because they're not getting the depth and the angle that you want to fish to sort of pull them or jig them or let them swing or something like that. But I'd say we were watching Ben and he fishing totally different to how we do it and catching plenty of fish as well. And he was putting a lot more movement into him, jigging him, and I'm asking him, what weights you got on there, and all these sort of questions. And from my perspective, I thought, that doesn't look quite right. And then you see him catching fish, and you think, actually, I'm missing a trick here. It's something that I haven't done, and sort of got into the water. I thought, I'm going to try these now. So the last few sessions have been out is just practicing some new techniques with a lot more angles and sort of putting a lot more movement into them, and it's resulted in a few more fish actually. So it's just one of those things, you never stop learning. Every day on the bank's different, and I just love it. Like every session you get out, just either trying a new technique or definitely it's brilliant. Like
nice. My experience, and I like jigging flies a little bit, but my experience tends to be, and that's my age and my slow reactions, that it tends to be in the down jig that they hit it. Whereas the up jig, it's easier to set on the fish when it happens. And when it's on the down one, I nearly always bump them when it happens, but it's kind of nice to see. And the other one at the end of the drift, I know you probably encourage people to set as well, just in case someone's taking it. But I've also found that lifting slowly to try and induce works. Do you play with those sorts of things at the end of the drift as well?
Yeah, it was interesting. There's like different ways of doing it, because you can either, when you're casting across the current, or if you're stood in a river, you've got the river going downstream. If you cast across, it's almost like you're fishing them a little bit like a spider, as in that you're swinging them downstream. They're like totally coming offline, but if the flies are getting down, it's just a different way to fish. You can actually swing them in the current, sort of hold your rod tip downstream of you and let them swing around, and you're getting a few takes doing that as well. And then obviously if you do it sort of normally conventionally upstream, get your nymph going both sort of vertically in line with your rod tip, tracking them down, and then watching and little lifts as they were going down right on the back end of it, and then as it was coming up, like I say, just rising that rod tip up on the back of that swing and just letting it come up a little bit. I mean, bumping a few more fish doing that, and it was very interesting. It's just downstream, like you touched on. It just seems to bump a few fish rather than a solid hook up, which results in a fish in the net. But you've got to do them things, even if it's just like 1 in 3 that you land, it's still like another fish that you wouldn't have caught if you hadn't have done it. So it's definitely another technique, and trying different positions in the water as well to see whereabouts they're taking them on what depth, or if it's just the current, or it's really interesting.
Some really great points. I want to go back to one thing before moving on to your, breaking down a pool, etc., etc. But you said something else, and when you were talking about the hardy rod that you're using, and when you're fishing the Y, and for listeners, the Y you can't wade in. So there might be other people listening who fish water that you can't wade in or not allowed to wade in. So what does that mean for you from a Euro setup? Or is that where the indicator fishing is more useful? Because I'm thinking of like a winter day where the wind might be blowing and you're trying to track the flies down. Can you overcome that? Or do you tend to go for if that's the case, you might switch to a indicator setup?
For me, I prefer Euro fishing just from the connection to the flies. There's nothing else like it. You've got more sensitivity, and you've got more ability to register a take quicker, faster, because everything's in contact more than an indicator that's sort of going down and you don't know really whereabouts your flies are. It's more of a little bit of a chuck and chance technique. You've still got to be able to do. You've still got to have it for the Y, because there's some pools that you just can't reach otherwise, because they're such a long way away. I mean, the wind is the biggest sort of pain on the Y, to be honest, especially if it's an upstream breeze as well, because you're just losing a lot of your connection. It's wanting to blow your indicator upstream. You can't really bring your flies downstream at the same pace that your wind's blowing it upstream. And actually, the last session we were out, it was the same most of the day, where you were battling against it. So it's sort of a trade-off, I suppose, in a little bit. Sometimes you might have to overfish, or put heavier fly in your dropper to anchor it in a little bit more, even though it's a little bit too heavy for where you're fishing or for the right drift. But if you can get a connection to it and get your leader fishing a little bit more tighter to it, it's a trade-off that you're going to catch. You're going to have a bit more connection to your flies. So definitely playing around with different areas, and I mean, the other thing as well is obviously not having to water load behind you with the Euro. You've got to use your weight of your flies, and you've got to have a rod that be able to sort of chuck nymphs from a standing position off the bank, sort of, and that's another big thing for me. And having a longer rod, and I also, I'll take my Hardy LL, the 11-foot 2-inch 2-weight out, because I've got a little bit more reach with that as well. And sometimes even just that extra few inches on your rod will be able to reach in a current that somebody else might have not got that right drift in. And that's why for me is something about it in winter for Grayling. It's so hard, but when you can sort of nail the fly or the technique or the water type where they're fishing, it really pays off. There's nothing quite like it when you're up one of those fish and you see it sort of twist and turn downstream.
Nice. Very, very good. Let's come back to the fishing perspective and fishing a pool. Are you breaking it down into sections and methodically working across, or do you go for the money shot first and then work out from there? Or where you think the money shot will be?
No, I usually work from the bottom of the pool up. Always put it in. I always try and fish short first. Work the pool out short, down the bank, or close to your edge. Just so if you've got a fish that hasn't spooked, you're covering it with a fly that it might not have seen you, and you've got a chance of catching a fish. I mean, the amount of fish I've caught close, to be honest, is quite surprising. It's a thing that you've got to do for me. It's working close and then working your way out different sections of the river, working your way out into the middle and across the far side from the position where you are, and then taking a step up, doing the same inside. It's hard sometimes when you know where the fish are sitting, especially if they're in a certain depth or a certain water type or something like that, especially if the river's rising or coloured up or something, or they're in edges, but you've still got to work them edges, because you just, so I remember a good friend of mine once said, never put it's different on the Y where you can't wade, but if you're coming from a Derwent's perspective, you never put your feet where you haven't put your fly first. But it's the same on the Y. Obviously, you're just stood up on the bank spooking everything rather than wading.
And what sort of distance you talked about fishing short first, which makes perfect sense, but where is your optimum distance how far away are you fishing your flies from yourself or the rod tip, or to just give people an idea? Are you throwing them a long distance, or are you fishing a comfortable distance where that is where you need to be, and you can get the most out of your drifts, but also without having issues with having to propel those flies more than where is somewhere comfortable for you to send them? And of course you can step up the river, so it's easy, but I just wondered if there is a level where you feel that's right for you.
That's a good question. I would say if you're going on an average, 2 to 3 rod lengths is on the way, you've just got to try and put your flies everywhere there's a fish. So if it is a long way out, you try and cast a long way. If you can't get a long way, you have to put a heavier bead on to cast it further. Just come back to that thing of trying to get your fly in from, in every bit of river. Even sometimes if it's not quite fishing right, you've got to get your fly there just in case there's a feeding fish that is willing to eat, because if not, you won't catch the fish. It's as simple as that, really. But on an average, usually it's about 2 rod lengths is what I would say. I mean, I can't really describe that. I mean, in feet, but it's to where you're comfortable that you can pick your Euro line up or have connection to it, that it's going to be nice and straight. You're going to sort of watch the drop and see if anything's coming down as the flies are sinking, making sure that you've still got a decent amount of connection to that the fish takes on the drop. You can sort of hit that as well. So yeah, it's a tough question, that.
No, I think you've answered that. The 2 rod lengths. It's really just to give people a sense of something that they can try. And I think one of the takeouts from this is how you're using a heavier fly to help you in a variety of situations, be it wind, be it getting a little bit more distance. So I think they're invaluable tips that hopefully people will be thinking about. And for you, again, I know this is a slightly tricky question because for you, what would a heavy fly be? Would it be 4 mil?
For me, anything really above a 3 mil, I would class as heavy. It's. I mean, that's just coming from if you've been fishing most of the summer, coming from like 2 mils, 2.5 mil beads, which is a standard, sort of the water that I'm wanting to fish. A 3 mil, is one. It's surprising how fast, if you actually watch it, if you stood in a bit of water and you sort of knee height water and you drop a 3 mil bead on the end of your cast, how fast that will sink. And you think about where you're fishing in relative to the water type. A 3.5 mil bead to me is, it's got some weight behind that. There's some tungsten in that, and it'll sink pretty fast. And I mean, the other thing as well is we were on about this with Steve the other day. Actually, is the actual a takeable fly as well. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I've not seen many nymphs swimming about with like a big 3 mil bead, attached to the front or anything like that. So the bigger you go, the more unnatural it looks. Even though it'll still take fish, and you'll still catch plenty of fish on a 4 mil bead and bigger. But it's coming from that natural point of view. A smaller beads, looking a little bit more naturaler and acting a little bit more natural as well in the current, in the flows, stuff like that. Just about presentation, really. Just like getting that good presentation, or how the fish want it on the day.
Great answer. Let's look at it from a clothing perspective as well, because we're imagining it's a winter morning. What are you layering up with? Have you got lots of stuff on, and do you jump out the river if you get a bit cold, or do you, being young, do you fish hard and just keep going through?
I am one of them where I have been known to get out of river. My knees seem to be knocking a little bit. I try and fish in the water as long as I can get away with, until I can't feel my feet, and they ended up being nubs, like feeling like nubs when you're getting out of the water. Now, to be fair, I use the good Patagonia wading trousers, the pants. I think they're thermally insulated as well, and for me, they're my go-to sort of underwader wear. And then on the top, usually got a usual just standard t-shirt, and then I go with like a Sims lightweight hoodie, and then I go sort of a full raincoat on top of that, and then depends if it is really cold, definitely a sort of a jacket or something. Give me plenty of layers. I always prefer to go with a few more layers. You can always take them off. But yeah, that's what I'd usually wear but usually a good coat's one of the main things, something that's definitely 100% waterproof. There's nothing worse than taking your raincoat off and realising that all your underclothes are absolutely wet through, and you're like, getting home and absolutely smelling tired.
Here's a question for you, because I've noticed years back, and I've not done it for a little while, that I wonder sometimes, having a vest over my waterproof jacket, that it does do something about the waterproof value of it. And sometimes over the years I've had wet shoulders and stuff like that. Do you wear your vest under or over your waterproof jacket?
As in sort of a fly fishing vest?
Yeah.
I would probably say over, just because I want that layer of waterproof on me covering. I'm not too fussed about the content. Most of the gear that should be outside should be waterproof, or at least have some sort of resistance to it for me. So I always go sort of the vest on the outside and have that waterproof coat sort of over my waders as well. So obviously, if I get rained on, it's going into the water and over my waders rather than into it. Because especially if you get some heavy downpours and it just funnels it straight down into your chest region. It's not fun. But yeah, that's. I mean, I don't often use a vest, to be honest. Only still water fishing, but for river fishing, you've just got a chest pack so that goes straight on. But yeah, I think looking after them is probably quite an important thing. The right washables and give them a quick spray of some sort of silicone or that sort of nature of spray to keep them waterproof. And at the end of the day, nothing's cheap and good to look after things.
Yeah, absolutely right. You have an association with one of my favourite fly fishing shops, Mallon and Green. I guess you spend a bit of your time in there, right?
I do. I spend quite a lot of time in there. It's just an absolutely fantastic shop, and everybody's just so friendly. It's almost, they say it's like a community hub there, and I would say it goes far. It's almost like a little family there that everybody sort of looks after each other. It's just such a friendly environment to be around, to go in. Everybody's sort of making each other cups of tea as soon as you go in, or have you had a good day? And just the friendliness of it is something that I haven't come across, in other shops or places that I've been. Yeah, I'd highly recommend a visit if you're anywhere around in the Bakewell area to have a pop in and just say hello to everybody. And also, the fantastic equipment they've got there. It's, fantastic. Yeah, awesome. They'll absolutely love it.
It's a great place, and I think we'll be up there very, very shortly, next year anyway, for another trip up there. So I'm looking forward to that one greatly. So that should be good. And Marie and John are just such great hosts as well, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely fantastic. They look after you, and everything that you might want in your fishing world, as in rods, reels, nets, wader equipment, clothing, everything's fully stocked, and they're willing to help. Any questions that you might have in there as well.
It's the sort of place you can, like you say, go in and hang out at, and you're bound to know somebody in there as well, aren't you?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of shop staff in there that fish and work around the rivers as well, and there's usually one or two local anglers in there anyway that point you in the right direction. And we've always got the river updates as well. If you're in need of fly choice or river levels or anything like that also helps. So yeah, just looking after the community really of the fishing hub around there.
Yeah, I love them, and I'll shout. I've got no connection other than liking the people behind it. But as Jack has mentioned, Diamondback rods, I don't know much about at all. But they like to look, as well as the well-established and well-known brands, they also have some slightly different stuff, and they're always on the lookout for different stuff. So it's worth having a visit if you just look up Mallon and Green and having a look at their website. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. There's some cool stuff in there, so go take a look at that. Wondered, have you travelled? You live in such an amazing place for fishing, but have you travelled much with the fly rod?
Yes. Well, not much as some other anglers, but I do have a bit of a soft spot for Bosnia. I've been there a couple of times now, I think, and yeah, it's definitely something that I sort of wish every time I come back that I'd had a longer holiday there, because it's just, when you're seeing the amount of grayling, and especially when you get a sort of a hatch as well, a blue wings or needle flies or midge or something like that, the river just absolutely just erupts with rising fish down these glides, and the size of them as well is just unbelievable, really. I'm not going to lie and say it's easy and you go up this river, catching one every cast or something like that, but it definitely teaches you how to sort of, for me, downstream dry fly to the best that you can. Because literally they'll be sat in a foam line and there might be 2 or 3 fish rising in your area, but unless you get it 100% dead drift and in that foam line without your sort of tippet bending or your fly just coming down at the wrong, they will not take it. So you've got to have everything right on point. And when it comes down and you just see that sort of a pound or even 2 to 3 pound fish coming up and sipping in a little size 20, 24 midge or olive or something like that, there's nothing quite like it for me. It's probably some of my favourite fishings, grayling on the dry fly, because they can be, notoriously tricky and selective and drag, especially sort of the drag element of the fishing is, you've got to be the best you can present it. It's, one of my favourites.
Any observations on when you get a fish eat your fly on a downstream dry on setting on a fish, and particularly grayling, in case people have been listening to what you've been saying previously as well about these things? Any observations?
It's a tough one. I would say I don't buy into all this waiting 3 seconds or give it, it's different on, I would say, big trout, giving it a little split second to wait for that nose to go down sort of thing. But for grayling, for me, I think I do strike pretty quick. I like to keep on them. I don't really know how many times fishing's fishing. You're going to lose fish. You're going to bump a few. You're going to miss a few. Everything like that. But I tend to strike straight away. Sort of as soon as I see that fish coming up, head eating it. By the time you've got all your slack in your leader and the other currents and your fly line and the bend in your rod and other little bits, I'd rather just set the hook and what will be sort of thing. Hopefully, most of the time you catch it. But it's a tough one.
No, that answers it perfectly. I'm bloody useless at hitting grayling on dries, so I will hit them quickly. I don't know if it is the way they take them comparable to trout. I don't know. Might be something, the shape of the mouth, the rise, everything along those sorts of lines, but I'm bloody useless at it. So I'm going to try, if I find some, to set on them super quickly. Do you have a dream destination? Is there somewhere that you would love to go visit with a fly rod?
I would say either Iceland or New Zealand, maybe, for some big trout on dries. That seems pretty high up on the list. I know, seen some pictures of some massive trout from Iceland come back on, speaking to other anglers as well from the trips they've had out there and catching like 3, 4, 5 and even plus fish on dries out there looks pretty spectacular, to be honest. That's definitely something on the bucket list. But I wouldn't mind either going Czech as well. That's something that I quite like to do in the next few years, maybe. Fishing the San, something like that, and giving them rivers a go. I'm pretty lucky where I live with the amount of fishing around here, but it's always nice to try somewhere else. I like having trips to the Dee as well, to be honest. Even in this country, there's still places that I want to go and want to fish. Much like the Frome you've just come back from, I'd like to go and fish that as well. That looks pretty special.
Yeah, that's a nice little mix, a nice mix of stuff. It's fascinating, isn't it, that when I started this podcast, how many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, that it was always New Zealand that was the popular one. It's amazing how Iceland now is a firm favourite with anglers with kind of similar sized fish, but you don't have that journey all the way down to the other side of the world either, do you?
Exactly. Yeah, it's not too far away.
And is salmon something you might be tempted by?
Not really. It's something that I'd like to say that I've done. I have caught a salmon, to be fair, but a spinning, so on the other method. But I would like to say that I've caught a salmon on the fly. So that's something that I'd like maybe to do a bit further down the line, maybe. But I can't say it's too far up on the list, just because for me, I don't really get the idea of fishing for a fish that doesn't want to eat. I want to fish for fish that you can catch and you see eating, and there's something about that for me that I love.
No, that's very, very fair. That's the attraction for me. I have to say, it's the madness of the whole thing that I find deeply attractive, and I catch so few of them, but still kind of enjoy it as a result of that. But work aside, fishing is something that your life revolves around in quite a big way. But is there anything else you like to do away from fishing?
I do occasionally like to do a bit of walking, a bit of hiking, I suppose. I haven't done too much of that, to be honest with you, in the last few years. I've mainly been fishing. When usually I'm not at work, I'm fishing, and when I'm not fishing, I'm at home time flies. That's most of my life, to be honest. But I do enjoy a bit of hiking. I love the wildlife and scenery. I mean, that sort of marries into the fishing anyway for me, because when you're out on the banks, you just see in some incredible places already. So I've not really needed to do the massive walks, because you're doing them anyway with a fly rod and in your hand, and seeing these amazing places from a different angle.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I think there is, fly anglers, there is an affinity with the great outdoors and wilderness and everything else that goes along with it, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here's the nasty question. I know I've thrown a few at you today, but here's the really nasty one. We have the playlist, the Fly Culture playlist. Can you give me a song that sets the tone for you if you're on your way to the river or you're going on a fishing trip somewhere?
This is going to be a bit of a strange one, but from a recent fishing trip coming back, having I would say a red letter day, sort of this song come on the radio, and it just sort of vibed with me a bit. So I'm going to stick with it. It's called Victory Lap by Skepta and Fred again. So it's a bit of a more recent song on the sort of rap side of things, but yeah, it's sort of hit the right spot, should I say.
Nice. Perfect. Lovely job. Okay, well, we've spoken. You see, I've moved on quickly because I've got absolutely no idea what you're talking about from the song point of view. So I'm going to go and have a listen to that myself. I do when people mention this. So I am going to go and have a listen to that. But for listeners, how can they find you on socials and things like that? Where do they find you?
Yeah, so just on Instagram, Jack Westbury. And that's about it, really. I'm not really too hard to find. Just type my name in Instagram. That's about it, really. I'm on Facebook as well. I don't do too much. You do a little bit on Instagram, so that's about the only place.
Nice, perfect, Jack. Well, I'd like to say a huge thank you. You've given us so much of your skill and expertise that I know listeners are going to really enjoy hearing about and hopefully putting into practice as well. So I would just like to say a massive thank you for being a guest on the podcast today.
Thank you very much, Peter. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, everyone, this has been another episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I think there was loads of information in there that I think you're going to enjoy. So hopefully you can try it out when you're out on the river next. I hope you're out fishing soon, but I'll be hopefully doing some more and also recording some more podcasts. So thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Fly Culture Podcast, brought to you in association with the Voice of Game Angling, Trout and Salmon, where Pete is the editor.